like, okay, I'll play a role. And the role was Chantal, but I sucked. I really sucked. Nobody wanted to employ my services. And I had put lipstick on and tried to make myself look this way. And I remember a moment like after, and there's like men coming through consistently. There's like 50 men I'd met, and not one of them said me. I was like, well, why isn't this working? And I thought, well, I'm trying to be something I'm not. So I wiped the lipstick off and I'm just going to go out there. And I just said to this guy, he told me he was new. He'd never been into a brothel. He had his wife had left him a year ago. Mm-hmm. He's like, I've never done this before. And I laughed. I said, neither have I. Like I said, I'm so brand new to this. I don't even know if I can go upstairs and do what you want. Like I said, I don't know. Like, and he booked me. And the funny thing is, there was no sex with that man. That man just laid there and cried his eyes out.
This is Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins. Hello and welcome to the 19th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This week I have with me Amberlee Jaay. Amberlee is from Australia. She is a mother, an NLP practitioner, and she's also a coach where she helps people leverage their social media by accessing their authenticity and their authentic voice. She also has a background in acting, and through sex work, she met her husband in sort of an Australian Pretty Woman story. I met Amberlee about a year ago. We connected on a Facebook group, and we chatted back and forth, and eventually decided to have a video call that lasted over 2 hours. Amberlee is one of the most authentic people that I've ever met. She is full of energy and also wisdom bombs. And we're getting real authentic within this. Amberlee is breastfeeding her newborn baby throughout this conversation. So trigger warning if you have a problem with nature. All right, here is Amberlee Jaay.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you?
Oh, baby.
Hello, Whitney. Hi.
Oh, she's so precious.
Hi. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. This is my reality now.
Yeah.
It's like back to square one, but that's okay.
You look fantastic.
I feel really good.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being patient in the time that it worked. She might. Let's see if I can get her while we're talking. I hope you might end up with a nipple slip. I give you a heads up.
That's totally okay.
I'll see if I can feed her because she's at that point. She's fighting me. Are you? They're funny little buggers, babies. When they're first born, they're all about the milk. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sudden they're like, oh no, this is what I want. I want my own independence. And thank you for being understanding.
Of course.
I know when you become a mama, I didn't get it until I became a mother.
Yeah.
I used to think when I worked in retail when I was younger, I was like, control your children. You know? Get a hold of them and you can't. Like I've learned that with my son.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to be a nanny also, by the way, for a lot of different families. And so that was probably the best birth control ever for me, is because I know how much work it is. So
I agree. My brother came when I was 17 and I never had sex until I was like 21. Like, yep, because I was terrified. I know it too well. Yeah.
I can relate to that. Yep.
Yeah.
I was afraid. I was so afraid.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Absolutely. Let me just give you whole permission. You can ask me anything. There is nothing that it really isn't. I'm not going to have like a Paris Hilton moment and, that you can't talk about this. I don't think there's anything that I'm uncomfortable with, to be honest. So that's a work in progress, but yeah.
Yeah. So how are you doing in general? You're in Australia, right? How has that been during the pandemic time and having a baby? And that's a lot.
Oh, let me tell you, it has been crazy. And let me explain why. So I found out that I was pregnant 2 weeks after the lockdown occurred in Australia. So Australia went into I was at a festival called Freedom Fest. And it was actually the last festival of 1,000 people together. And when we were in the audience, it scared the hell out of me because half the audience was from New Zealand.
Oh.
And they came in and announced that the New Zealand Prime Minister had made the decision if nobody's back in their country in the next 36 hours, they'll have to go into 2 weeks quarantine. So half the audience disappeared, like in minutes. They just disappeared, got their planes rebooked, they went. And then my husband, because at the time, well, I didn't know I was pregnant, but my husband was home with my 2-year-old, said, I was meant to come home a couple of days later. He's like, I need you to come home because I don't know if they're going to stop us from flying from state to state.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, I was freaking out. And I was freaking out because I come from a traumatic background of abuse. And I was worried that this lockdown situation was going to reignite these behaviors that I used to have. And then I discovered also that I was pregnant on March. So this was like March 12th. And on March 22nd was my husband's 35th birthday. And I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And I was excited because one of the things that had happened previously is my body chose to miscarry. And I lost the baby that I was carrying. And so that was exciting. It was on my husband's 35th birthday. And then we found out, because the doctor was worried I was having, well, not worried, but concerned I had twins because I had such high hormone levels after my body chose to miscarry. And then I was freaking out. I was going to have twins and I was going through this process. Then I found out, no, but the baby was due. My daughter was due on my mother-in-law's deceased birthday. So like it was all these amazing things that were happening despite what was going on in the world. And I really took a moment, like I was concerned. And then I realized, like, this is no different to when you have a baby. When you have a baby, when the baby's born, you're in lockdown. You can't go out and do anything. You're basically throwing your hands up. You no longer do the things that make you feel good. And I realized, well, it's just the universe has given me this in preparation for it. And I thought, because if I have one child, now I'm going to have a second one. It's going to be amplified. Yeah, like absolutely amplified. So even when the more restrictions came in, so here in Melbourne, Australia, we got more restrictions. What I mean by that, we weren't allowed to leave our house after 6 o'clock at night.
Wow.
We weren't allowed to leave. We were only allowed to leave for 1 hour a day. So there was extreme things. And because I was able to frame it in a way that, okay, this is just getting me ready for when a baby was come, it removed like the trauma from it all. And I was okay with it. Like I kept just being flexible, because one of the things I've learned, and Whitney, you'd have to agree, is like the person with the most flexibility always wins.
Wow.
Yeah. And so having myself permission, Melody, just to throw my hands up and go, okay, universe, you can guide me, you can take me, it's okay.
All right. Can we just acknowledge how much like work you've had to do to get to the point to be able to be that flexible? Because you can just say, I'm just being flexible, but that's so not so easy.
And you're so right. I don't acknowledge the time that I've done in the work. Like, one of the best things I've ever done is I come from an acting background. And so I went into acting and I've always wanted to follow it. But when you learn to train as an actor, you have to learn to be flexible. You learn, it's not easy. Like you said, I remember like there was times that I couldn't even say the words clearly on the stage. And I remember I stood there unable to have the words come out in acting class. I stood there for 10 minutes trying to get the words and they couldn't come out. And I cried my eyes out while I was trying to get these words out, and I refused to. But each time I showed up, the words would slowly come out a little bit more. And so now I have this freedom and this flexibility, but it's about consistently showing up. And even if it's like what we're doing that many people don't see is, if you think about Michelangelo's work, David, it's chipped from stone. And we chip away at that. And he chipped away to create David. It wasn't this.
Right.
And so that's what we are. We're chipping away at the stone that we've cast around ourselves to survive. And that's the authenticity piece. And we just chip at it a little bit, 1% today. In 100 days, there's 100% difference to what it was 100 days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go back to the beginning of you a little bit, to get to how your story has progressed over the years, I have a question for you. I usually ask everyone, when was the first moment that you realized that you had an inner authentic voice of your own? Can you remember,
Whoa.
like, in your childhood, or you weren't affected by your environment or your family? It was just like, this is me and I know who I am.
I love that you asked this question. It's at 11:11 a.m. here in Australia. So it's like this big, like, whoa, that, let me take a moment and think, wow, that I've had it since I was a little child. I remember this feeling that would overtake me and I didn't understand it. And it was beautiful and sincere and light. Like it was so light, but I didn't understand it. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember the moment, and tears are coming back to me as I realized this, is that I was sitting in the car and I was very young and my mum and dad had decided to get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my mum, like, why isn't daddy here anymore? And my mum turned around and said, that it's not, we can't have daddy here. It just doesn't work anymore. Like she was giving adult reasonings.
Yeah.
And I knew that that wasn't right. Like I knew it wasn't right. And I wanted to know more, but she kept questioning me about it. Like she'd dismiss it.
Mm-hmm.
She would dismiss it. And I understand now, like as an adult, I look back at that memory in the rear view mirror, I saw my mother with a black eye. So
Mm-hmm.
she made a choice to forgo what everything else was to make sure that we were safe. Because I look back at the behaviors and the interaction my father's had throughout the life, it's toxic. And that's because he's hurting. It's not judgment. It's just because he comes from a toxic background. So we repeat those things. But
Right.
it wasn't until I struggled with my eating disorder. I'm not, well, the eating disorder I had, because I don't want to identify it with anymore because it's not a part of who I am. In my 20s, that I started realizing that there's many voices in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to really get questioned, like, well, the voice that's real to me only comes from a place of love. Like it never says anything mean or spiteful. It's only come from a place of love, and it's quiet and it's calm and it has certainty. But it took time, like from that moment with my mother where I dismissed it, and consistently all the time being told, not when I questioned things, because I knew that there was something wasn't right, that I dismissed it, that I had to basically create an eating disorder, which sounds bizarre for me to reconnect. So that's my blessing. Like I love to look at things, Whitney, and reflect, well, even though these things have happened, what is the gifts that they're given me?
Right.
And the disordered eating gave me the gift of owning my authentic voice, the voice that's real to me.
Right. Like to be Buddhist about it, turn poison into medicine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Your eating disorder, what was it based on? Like you felt like you needed to appear a certain way, or were you more depriving yourself of nutrients because of like you didn't value yourself?
That's such a good question. So the moment that this happened is when I was 17. My dad and I were having an argument on the phone, and my dad was distant, very distant throughout our lives. He picked and chose when he wanted to come in. And it was interesting because I was doing my final exams to go into university, and we had a disagreement. And my dad didn't like my mum and my mum's partner, and he used to belittle her, and I would defend my dad and my mum, of course. And I'd been working the last year for him because he lived overseas, and he promised me money for my graduation dress. And he turned around and said, am I okay to swear on here? I hope you don't
Yeah,
mind, like a
absolutely.
curse
Go for
word.
it.
So he turned around and told me that my mum was a fucking slut. Now in that moment, I was like, how dare you say that when you pick and choose when you come out of my life? But my mother, despite her complications of where she's at, she's continuously showed up. And so I said, you can't, I defended her. You can't say that about my mum. And I swore back. And then he said to me, there's half your money gone. And I said, I don't care about the money. I said, I don't care. You can keep your fucking money. You can stick the money where the sun doesn't fucking shine. That's like a real Australian thing to
Yeah.
turn around. And he said, did you know that you're not my daughter?
Oh.
And I just went, what? And I remember the moment he said that to me, because I look different to my sisters, but we're the same. And my sisters were skinny. Whereas I'm not big by any means, but I have a woman's body. Whereas my sisters were sticks. And I actually took that in, and I couldn't speak. And I thought at that moment, what makes me different? And it was that. So I started to starve myself, because I thought if I was pretty enough and skinny enough, maybe my dad would own me. And then that overtook me, and that my whole basis of life was based, here comes a baby, based on my physicality and how other people saw me. Are you going to say hello?
Hi.
This is the reality now. You are talking now, aren't you?
Yeah.
That's even one of the reasons why I went to acting, because I thought if I was successful as an actor, that people would see me as beautiful, and then maybe I would give myself to see myself as like that permission piece to be beautiful as well.
Oh, well, you're beautiful too.
She's talking. She taught me about beauty, actually. That's
Yeah.
the gift of pregnancy.
Yeah. So how did you get to love your body authentically?
Wow. That's a good question too. Pregnancy. I know it sounds strange. My first pregnancy, no. With my son, I hated it. But something clicked within me when I found out I was having a daughter. So I found out at 12 weeks I was having a little girl, and I realized you are talking the ripple effect. And I know I have a NLP background, so timeline therapy, we learned that, and this is scientific fact, that things can be passed through the womb. The feelings of a mother, it doesn't matter, anger, sadness, joy, even beliefs are passed through the womb. And I said to myself, there is no way my daughter is going to carry this belief.
Right.
So I went, and I knew, Whitney, in the back of my mind for years, like I'd been struggling for this for 20 years and bulimia. And I got to a point that I'd stopped vomiting, but I was over exercising and under eating to maintain my weight, and which is a form of bulimia. And so what happened is what I knew in the back of my mind is that I needed to work with somebody that worked like a psychologist that worked with people with eating disorders, and a dietitian, because I knew my ideas around food were wrong.
Right.
And as soon as I sought that help, within a month I was cured. And I hate to say the cure, because it's not like necessarily like that, but I knew what I needed to do. But I needed to have a scaffolding around me that supported me, that allowed me to change my thinking, because it comes back to that authentic voice.
Right.
I had other voices, like I talk about Prisha, perfectionist. She loves to be perfect. She wants to be beautiful. She wants to be seen. And she's just the little me in me, like the girl in me that wanted my dad's and my mother's approval and thought perfection was the key. Well, I got to learn that Prisha's not the voice that leads me. And when she comes up, she's amazing when she comes up when I'm stressed, because she allows me to know that I'm feeling vulnerable right now. And that, I have conversations with her all the time, like I do with my children, is that it's okay to be vulnerable, because the one thing that I seek most from anyone in this world is vulnerability. And so wouldn't other people want that from me too?
Right. Were you able to play with that vulnerability with your acting?
Wow, I wish I could now since I have the kids, but I do it in my message online. So I have a presence online, and I leverage social media to make money. And what I love about it is that I consistently get to authentically show up online. And it's what's rewarding about it with me. Yes, I make an income from it, but people reach out into my inbox and they tell me, thank you for giving me permission to own this, or that they share. Like for me, something else is that I had a background in sex work, and a year ago I revealed that. I had 5 women that reached out to me that were connected to me in some way. I had no idea that they had that background, and they said, thank you. I actually had a discussion with my husband about this, or with another person, and I've never shared anybody this secret.
How does that feel to be so vulnerable and connect with people and have that affect them?
It's satisfying. And what I mean by that is like everything that my heart was searching for.
Right.
It's like it means I matter and that other people matter and that they're seen. And for me, like the greatest gift I can give any soul that I ever meet is that they feel like they're seen, heard, and felt.
Mm-hmm. How did you maintain your authenticity within the sex work?
Wow, that's a good one too. I sucked trying to play a role. I remember my first night. So I fell into this because I owed a $10,000 debt to the Australian government. And they told me, like in Australia, sex work is legal. And I was trying to earn money while I was at university, and the government was giving me a pay, like money. They were giving me money, and I lied because there wasn't enough money. So they were investigating me, and I Googled brothels, Melbourne. 4 days later, I was working in a brothel. 4 days later, I didn't even know what I was doing. Whitney, and then what happened, I was trying to play this role. One of the women said to me, you know, when I come in the door, I put on Imogen, and when I leave, I'm Paige, right? And she said, I play a role. And I was like, okay, I'll play a role. And the role was Chantel, but I sucked. I really sucked. Nobody wanted to employ my services. And I had put lipstick on and tried to make myself look this way. And I remember a moment like after, and there's like men coming through consistently. There's like 50 men I'd met, and not one of them said me. I was like, well, why isn't this working? And I thought, well, I'm trying to be something I'm not. So I wiped the lipstick off, and I'm just going to go out there. And I just said to this guy, he told me he was new. He'd never been into a brothel. He had his wife had left him a year ago. Mm-hmm. He's like, I've never done this before. And I laughed. I said, neither have I. Like I said, I'm so brand new to this. I don't even know if I can go upstairs and do what you want. Like I said, I don't know. Like, and he booked me. And the funny thing is, there was no sex with that man. That man just laid there and cried his eyes out. Oh, wow. And talked about how he wished he was a different man because his wife left him, because he made the commitment to his work rather than to his wife, you know. And that's what it came. Like, yeah, there might have been people who would book me for an hour, and there was maybe sex for 10 minutes, but then we'd be laughing in the room. Like there was clients that would bring me like Chinese to eat, or we were watching like series, and so that's how I could show up. That's how I was a success, was just being me and that's why I sucked as an actor. I have to be honest. Like, well, one, because I let Prisha run the show, Prisha Perfectionist, but the other was I was trying to be something I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I feel like everyone in this world, and you would agree to this, have been born to be just them.
Right. There's no other option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and because you chose to be authentic, you met your husband through this, didn't you?
I did. I remember I wrote about this the other day because I revealed it a year ago, terrified of it. And then I wrote about it. I shared how me having permission to share online about the sex work that had happened, like me being a sex worker, it gave my husband permission to share with me that he'd been sexually abused when he was younger, something that he'd never told anyone his entire life, which is fascinating because I thought I knew my husband because he'd shared everything to that point. But when I met him, like, it's bizarre. Who would think it was Pretty Woman in that way? That I walked into a room. I walked into this room and I had this feeling for Lebanese men, and my husband's Maltese, but he looked like this dark stallion. Mm-hmm. And I saw the whole universe in his eyes. Oh, wow. Like there was so much more to him. Authenticity, like me being authentic and me trying to be, because I wanted to impress him. Like I was like trying to be some sophisticated woman, and I did like Bridget Jones moment and I fell in his lap. And then the authenticity came back out again. Like I was like laughing. I was like, that's something that we do when you pay me upstairs. I shouldn't be in your lap right now. And then what happened is like, you're making a fool out of yourself. So I stormed out, and I swear he must have thought I was on something. And then what happened is that authentic voice you talk about, like that, it said to me, you need to go back in there and tell him that you want to fuck him. And I was like, what? You can't say that. You cannot tell anybody that. And it's like, you have to do it. And I went to walk the other way, like to walk away. And then it was like, no, I can't. I cannot resist that. So I walked into the room and I said to him, I want to fuck you. Okay, see you, bye, and left. Like, because I'd never said that to any other human being before. And I remember the receptionist loved it because somebody else had booked me. And so I had to go upstairs with the client for 30 minutes. And then I kept saying to the receptionist, did he book me? Did he book me? Did this guy book me? Did he book me? And then they're like, no. And then I came down because it was upstairs. I'd come down the stairs and there he was. He was waiting for me. And he kept coming back in and I'd given him my number. I'd broken a rule. Like I gave him my number. Like I want to spend time with you outside here. And he didn't. And I remember what happened is like, he came in like about the fifth or sixth time. I said, I'm annoyed at you. And he's like, why are you annoyed at me? And I was like, well, you said you're going to ring me and you never said you never did it. So I don't want anything to do with you. And I was in the room like sulking, tidying up because you have to tidy up the room ready for the next people. He rang me on my phone. And I was like, what's his phone number? And I didn't. And then I saw and I looked behind me and he was on his phone. I was like, well, if he's on his phone, I'm going to be on my phone too. You know, like, you know, when you get real annoyed. And I was like, hello, Amberlee speaking, because my working name was Chantal. And he's like, hey, this is Frank. And like, and I knew it was him. Like, and we're having a conversation and he invited me on my first date, like in the room in that moment. And it's just been really sweet. Like, all because I gave myself permission to follow my authentic voice, even though I was terrified to say that to another man, like to a man, even though I knew I was selling my body to people. Like at that time, I was still terrified to say it. And because I gave myself the permission, I have a Cinderella life. And what I mean by that is like, I'd been searching to have a family and now I've made my own family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You're attracting everything that you were craving that you didn't have because you chose to be authentic. Oh,
thank you.
She has a preference.
Oh, I wish she didn't, but today she does, which is okay.
That's okay. We all have preferences. That's part of our authenticity, right?
The problem is it doesn't, like in your mind as a parent, you're like, it doesn't fit into my time factor. But, you know, that's the thing about kids. They're always returning you back to authenticity. Yeah.
Because they are nothing but authenticity, bundles of them. Right.
Yeah. You're right.
So you work with people now and coach them to find their authenticity pretty much. Yeah. So can you describe what it is you do a little bit?
Oh, well, what I do, which is interesting, I help people leverage social media to make money. And what I like about it, it's also aligned with affiliation with a 50-year-old company. But what I really enjoy about it, it's a transformational experience. And every woman that I've worked with, I've got a couple of men that I work with too, but they've learned to own their own authentic voice. And so some of them are continuous with this affiliation with the company, which they absolutely love, or some of them, which blows my mind, are now channeling source and that they're giving words of wisdom to people that they weren't connected to. And it's like that authentic voice permission. Like for me, like I come back to like how I found Cinderella because I said yes. I feel like my role is with this piece that I do is that I give everybody permission to say yes without fear and no without guilt.
That's good. And you're teaching people what you've learned along the way also.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that, but it is.
It's pretty fantastic. So where could people find your work? Like if they wanted to follow you or figure out how they can leverage their social media?
I love it. So it's my name, Amberlee Jaay. So AMBERLEE Jaay. Jaay. I'm thinking, is my accent getting in the way? But it's my name, Amberlee Jaay, and I'm on Facebook and social media. And I run my business through my personal account. I have a professional page, but I love through my personal account because the people that I work with are my soul tribe. And what I mean by that is that they're the people I say every day, I love you. And they say it in back. And so in another form, I found another family. I always felt like, I hate to use this like that metaphor, but everybody knows the analogy of black sheep.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
know, like, and I feel the more that you align with your authentic voice, you get categorized as the black sheep.
Right.
And but really you're not a black sheep. You're showing all the colors that are within you, so you're a colorful rainbow sheep. And what I love about what I do is that they're my family. They're my soul sisters and soul brothers, and another aspect of the family that I was searching for. And it all came from just aligning back to my authentic voice.
Yeah. Also, talking about family, the one that you have and have created, how are you nudging them in the right direction to follow their authentic voice, having had the background and even maybe a little bit trauma in your past? How are you able to show, or do you have like a specific goal in mind?
I constantly have to throw my hands in the air like that because I was listening to something beautiful today, and the woman was Noelle, and she shared that the reason why most of us disown our voice because it's we're wanting to fit in the clan, and you know that that's about like survival is the tribe, and our parents and families silenced our voices because if we didn't align, then they would be ostracized and they weren't there. So it's really about just continuously throwing my hands in the air and allowing my children to be how they want to be and not how I think they should be. So, for example, like my grandfather is 89, he's almost 90, and he's very old school. Like children shouldn't be seen, they should be quiet, you know, and if they are, they're quiet. And even like this, I remember my grandfather, like the kids weren't allowed to eat the cakes that were baked that day. The children had to eat the old cakes. Like it's just that real old school mentality. And we went and visit my grandfather. And what happened is he didn't like the noises that my son was making. Like he was making the noises of a dinosaur. My son is going through this stage that he loves being a dinosaur. Like, and I'm not going to silence that. No. I can say there's inside voices and outside voices, but if he wants to, and he's not screaming in my grandpa's ear, and my grandpa doesn't even have hearing.
Right.
Like, right? Like I'm like, his hearing's gone. You get what I mean?
I do.
But he turned around and said to him, like, to be quiet. And I said, no, I'm not, like, you need to tell your son to be quiet. I'm not going to tell my son to be silent. There was even another example when we were at the market recently, and my son, because I had a home birth at home, my son knows the anatomy. He knows how it works. Like, and he talked around and said, my baby sister came from my mummy's vagina. That's like he says, right? And it's funny. And then he said, I'm growing a baby boy in my tummy. And this woman turned around and said, no, you're not. You don't have a baby in your tummy. Boys don't have babies. And my son is 3.
Right.
And I turned around and said, no, Zion, if you want to grow a baby, you can have a baby growing in there. And she went to judge me. You know, she's like, well, you're one of those people. And I said, yeah, I am one of those people. See, my son is 3. I'm not going to stop his voice or his imagination. So if people come and say things that, you know, it's not, I can't protect him from the outside world, but when people come up that's not in alignment with what I believe, I now speak up. Whereas before I had children, I probably didn't. I just internalized it. And there was a beautiful thing that I learned, like I would internalize it so I didn't cause fires outside, but therefore it caused a fire within me. And that's what my children are giving me, my voice, so that when I don't agree with something, I say no, rather than trying to keep the peace.
Yeah. Give you a fire behind your voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you realize it's not like, it's funny because you realize it's more than just you. and that's and I'm always in awe of women that before they even have children or choose not to have children, and they know that. But it was, for me, the piece was I had to have children to recognize the ripple effect.
Yeah. We're all connected.
You're right.
Yeah. So I have a question. If your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
It's so loud when you're in comparison to you. I love it because you're so calm. I love it. And I want to scream out, own it. Like, own it. That's my big thing. Like, you know how Nike said, just do it? Mine is own it. As soon as you own the crap and your role in the crap, and what I mean by that is that we all have a role to play in the things that have happened to us. We can transform it into the lesson, to the blessing, to the fire that ignites us. And that fire enables us to create the life of our choosing.
It's perfect. Own it. Everyone, own it. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I want to let you get back to your baby.
She's asleep, which is nice. But I just want to honor you. And what I mean by that is that we've known each other for almost a year now.
Wow.
And the transformation that I've seen in you, like, you've owned it. Continuously growing and transforming and stepping into your light.
Just for the listeners, like, we met a year ago because we were part of a Facebook group, and we ended up chatting a lot, and then we decided to have a video call, and I think we ended up talking for about 2 hours. And so you're incredibly full of sunshine, and so I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And what you're sharing.
What I've come to learn is only together that we can thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just follow your heart. Like, it might be hard, it might be complicated, and it doesn't make sense, but it brings the joy that you're seeking, and that all that pain that you think through the discomfort, one of my friends calls it fun comfort, like you're changing and evolving, comes everything that you're searching for.
Fun. Oh, that's a brilliant word. I want to live in that. Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay tuned in to you.